And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight's conversation. Sara Dean is a mindset, business, and leadership coach. She is also the creator and host of Shameless Mom Academy podcast, a top-rated podcast with over 3 million downloads. She is on a mission to inspire women and moms in particular to live a bigger, bolder, and braver life. Hashtag every damn day. When she's not supporting Shameless Moms, you'll find Sara with her husband and her 8-year-old son building Legos and pretending to understand Minecraft. And now for our featured author, Dr. Traci Baxley is a professor, consultant, parenting coach, speaker, mother to 5 biracial children, and the creator of Social Justice Parenting. An educator for over 30 years with degrees in child development, elementary education, and curriculum and instruction, she specializes in diversity and inclusion, anti-bias curriculum, and social justice education. She lives with her husband and children in Boca Raton, Florida, and she is here today to talk about her book, Social Justice Parenting. Please welcome Sara Dean and Dr. Traci Baxley.
Thank you, Deshali. Traci, we're here.
Yay! We arrived and we
arrived and we match. We have to tell people how this all came to be, because it started with a podcast interview and a number of months ago now that was released last week. And you emailed me after the podcast interview, and I'll let you tell the rest.
Yes. So at the end of the podcast, when we weren't taping, we decided we really liked each other beyond the podcast. And Sara said, if you need anything, when the book comes out, if you need me to, put anything up in my village and my audience, I'd be happy to do that. And so like a week later, we found out that Village had invited us to do the talk. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's close to Sara. Yes. So I reached back out to Sara and was like, I got a job for you. And she graciously right away said, absolutely.
Yes. And so, and also when we were talking about this, it seemed like that's just like way off in the future. And I'm sure you were like, yeah, like whenever my book comes out, like way off in the future. And now here we are. And you birthed the book, baby. Congratulations.
I did. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. So exciting. So I want to go right into the meat of our conversation tonight, because I know that there's a lot for us to cover, because there's so many great things in the book. And oh my goodness, I was telling you before we got on with participants and attendees tonight that I have the hard copy, but I started listening to the audiobook as well. It's so good. It's so good. So I just want to thank you for everything you've put into this, because it's definitely the book the world needs right now, and the book that families need right now. So can you kick us off and just tell us about you and the different ways that you identify? Because I think there's so many layers to your identity, and that really comes through in this book.
Yes. Deshali gave you my professional, my professional bio as a professor and a coach and a consultant. But, the biggest hat that I wear is that of being a mother. And I take that role very seriously. And all my other roles are secondary to that. I am a mother of biracial children and Black children, right? They're biracial by birth, but also I teach them what it means to be Black and have brown skin in the world. And, I'm also a mother to children with neurodiversity, and they neurodiverse, 3 of them have something that could be challenging, but could be seen as gifts as well. And I think another thing a role that I don't talk about much is I'm also an other mother, right? Black feminist scholar Patricia Hill Collins talks about Black women being always other mothering, which means that we mother people who are not in our homes. We mother to people who we didn't give birth to, right? And so it's this idea of this community and building village. And I think I take that role very seriously as well. So all of these different identities really wrap around how I show up in the world, really for children and families.
I love all that. And as I was reading and through the book and listening through parts of the book, what I noticed was how many of the stories, there's a relatability factor to them as a unit, like the universal relatability as a mom. But what's really impactful is the added layers of, I can relate to the stress that you were feeling in a moment of parenting as a mom. What I can't relate to necessarily is you're seeing this through the lens of, I'm in this situation as a mom, and I'm in the situation as a mom of a neurodiverse child. And also I'm in the situation as the mom of, in this one story, I'm thinking of a Black son. And there's so many layers to that. And I love and so appreciate that we get to have this commonality of parenting in the book, but then these really eye-opening instances in terms of what does it look like, where these areas that we're parenting is not universal. It's very different from one household to the next, and very different if you are a family with Black parents and children, and then also layering into that neurodiversity as well. So thank you for sharing all those layers of your identity.
You're welcome. And I think, thank you for bringing that up, because I think part of that is kind of like, like the Wizard of Oz, right? We're opening the curtain to see what's behind the curtain, that we all kind of work in our own silos, often in our own, people with the same backgrounds or the same identities as we have, and we don't get a chance to see life from somebody else's perspective. So to me, you saying that helps me feel like I've given a new perspective to people who may not have some of these identities that they can relate to, or that they think about in their everyday lives.
Yeah. And it makes us all better citizens when we can remember that we're all existing in these different ways, and that we don't always understand someone's background or situation. Let's make space for that.
Yes.
Can you talk about how your career has paralleled and intersected with motherhood? Because I'm guessing that is maybe the birthplace of the book.
Absolutely. That moment that you were talking about when I was on my closet floor crying, that was the birth of social justice parenting.
I'm cutting you off because that was the story I was referring to. So I was thinking, as a mom, I so related to the intensity of that situation as a mom, and then adding in the layer of your son who was struggling with anxiety, and that he's a Black man, a young man, and potentially had run out of the house. Do you want to share a little bit of that story?
Yeah, it was, when we had first realized that he had OCD and that he had high anxiety. We always knew he had this perfectionist personality, but we realized that and that he was having intrusive thoughts, and that we had gotten this diagnosis. We had been going to therapy around it to try to give him coping skills and strategies to manage. And this was really at the height of his struggles. And he remembered at the last minute in the morning that we're me trying to get all 5 kids to school, that he forgot to do a homework assignment. And I basically said, it's not that big of a deal. Do what you can, do part of it in the car. And then if you get half credit for it, it's not a big deal. This is going to teach us to kind of manage this better, and, use your planner or whatever that was. And I went on about my morning, getting everybody ready. And then when I went to the car for everybody to get in the car, he didn't get in the car. And in the beginning, I was very angry about it. But as I started going back into the house and searching for him, that anger became like full-blown panic, because I knew when his anxiety kicks in, he's not rational thinking. And I just kept thinking about him running around the neighborhood, and we're basically the only Black family in my neighborhood. 6'2" Black male running around the neighborhood, maybe not in his rational state of being. What was going on with him? Where was he? Who was seeing him? And all of those thoughts, are flooding in as I'm panicking, looking for him. But it was in that moment that I realized, me trying to protect my kids, me trying to teach my kids of how to survive in Black skin in this country, it wasn't enough. that I had to then figure out how I can teach people beyond my family, beyond my circle, to love my kid and protect my kid and to look out for my kid. And that is kind of how the whole idea of social justice parenting began with, we need each other, right? We have to teach each other to see our kids as our own, right? This whole idea of other mothering, this whole idea of village and network and family extended beyond our homes. And so that's what really started the book.
Who is this book for? Besides our people I'm like, I want to shout out the people who are like right here, right now and be like, it's for you and it's for you and it's for you. But I bet that you wrote this through a specific lens and you started to just dip into this a little bit. Who did you write the book for and who's your audience?
I did. When I was first writing the book, I was going back and forth between, am I writing this for other Black moms and moms of color? Am I writing this book for white moms who need to know what's going on in Black homes? I knew it's for parents, but I also know it's for moms, right? The percentage, the studies show that moms are the ones who are making those kinds of decisions in their families, and buying the books and reading and the self-help things are high with moms. And also, I just believe in the power of mothers, right? I think when we put our minds to doing something, when we band together as a group, we're just unstoppable, I think, in a lot of ways. So it was to moms. But as I started to write the book, I realized I don't want to choose between Black moms and white moms, because the message, the core values of social justice parenting, the core foundation, it's for all of us. You don't even really have to be a parent to really be involved in social justice parenting if you have a child in your life. And so, the ideas of open dialogue, the ideas of being reflective and compassionate and kindness and being engaged in social justice, this is for any mom. Now, do I have a chapter in there on anti-racism? Yes. And that's mostly geared to white moms, although Black moms need to think about how we can become more active too. So I think if you are a mother and you want to raise children who are more compassionate, who are really going to be the change agents that we want to see 10 years, 20 years from now, then I think this book is for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you give some examples later in the book. I think it was in chapter 8, you were creating space for different family members to identify like what they're passionate about around social justice and around being community members and being good citizens and those different elements. And then deciding like, where do they want to dig in from there, which I thought was really, really cool, because that creates space for, your 12-year-old son to decide that they're really into one thing and your 18-year-old daughter something else and the mom something, which is very cool. Instead of, if you're like me, when you're like, the whole family's going to do this one thing together. So is there space for everyone to really decide like, where do they want to be justice minded and conscientious of the community?
Yeah, and I think we think this social justice is a big, heavy thing that only certain people do or certain groups do, but we all are doing that, and we're all responsible for doing that. And if you have a child who's passionate about something, it is a great place to start, start digging into what we can do to help. What does that look like? What are the organizations around that? What's our responsibility in that? And when you start doing that, then you can then include other social justice issues, asking the same questions. What are our responsibilities? Who are the players? What do we need to do? How do we need to show up?
Absolutely.
And you can substitute any social justice issue asking those types of questions.
Yes. So I believe you said it when I interviewed you for the podcast, but you said it again today when I was listening to the audiobook, that parenting is activism. And I heard it and I was like, I'm so glad I heard that today, because I didn't have that on my list for tonight, but I was like, I'm adding that in because I think that that's such an important thing to remember. And it's kind of like a for better or worse. So you can choose to ignore a whole bunch of things and that's your activism, or you can choose 100%. To be intentional in a certain way. And then that's your activism. So do you want to dig into that just a little bit before we move on?
No, you're spot on, right? I always say, the way we show up in the private spaces of our home, that's the way your children are going to show up in public places, right?
Yeah.
So whatever you're putting into them, whatever you're pouring into them, whatever core values you're following in your house, those are the people that are going to show up in the real world, right? And what kind of people do we want to show up 10 years from now? It really depends on what you do in your home. And again, activism is the small things you're doing in your daily life, the practices that you do in your daily lives, what you're reading with your kids, what you're talking about with your children, your core values and how you are acting on those core values in your home. All of those are activism, because it's going to teach your children how to stand up or not, right? For others when they're out in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. You open the book talking about telling a story about your husband being pulled over by the police. It's a really powerful story. And can you tell us about that moment and then why it stayed with you? I believe in the book you said you cried for 3 days after, understandably so.
Yes. My husband, who is white, was driving our 3 little boys to school. I think they were still in elementary school, the 3 of them during that time. And basically my husband got pulled over by a police officer, but my husband didn't pull over right away because he thought the police officer was trying to go around him. And finally, when the police officer was very angry, telling my husband to pull over, when he finally pulled over, the police visibly had his hand on his gun, like ready to draw. Now, my husband drives a black Toyota Camry, and the windows are a little bit tinted. I mean, that's the way they came from the factory, but they're kind of dark. And the officer was screaming at him with his gun in his hand, telling him to roll the blanket window down. And so as my husband is rolling the window down, the police officer visibly removed his hand and his body relaxed when he saw my husband's face. And I think that shook me a little bit to my core, because I just thought, what if my son was driving this car? Like, how would this scenario look a bit different? The police basically said, next time you see my lights, you need to pull over. And then my husband just went on to take our boys to school. But I just kept imagining, if that was my oldest son, what if my oldest son was driving? What if my oldest son was driving? How would this be so different? The result of this be so different?
Right.
And it really, and I always talk about this idea of fear-based parenting and how we have to really move away from this fear-based parenting, because it keeps our kids in a bubble. It keeps us from not really telling the truth to our kids about what's going on in the world. And if the kids don't know what's going on in the world, they can't be prepared for it, and they can't act in ways to change it. And I felt that fear, that raw, paralyzing fear, thinking that this could have been very different had it been my son.
I believe the officer said, did the officer say something to your husband like, typically people with tinted windows? Wasn't there like some sort of like stereotype that he made?
He asked him, do you know who drive cars like this? And my husband was like, do you mean like Toyota Camrys? And he said, no, dark cars with dark tinted windows. And so, I guess he had his mind made up of who was going to be behind that window screen when it went down. And my husband was not the face that he was expecting.
I think that as I listen to your stories and read the stories in the book, what's so impactful to me is the things that are new to me, that are like a new lens to see things through. And this like, oh my gosh, that's different than how I exist in the world and the considerations I have to make while parenting. And I'm guessing that other people of color who read the book are like, oh yeah, like that's what we are dealing with every day as a parent of Black and brown children, or as Black and brown citizens ourselves. And I think that the stories are so impactful because we can start to see like, holy cow, how are we making space for each other? And how are we being conscientious of the fact that people that our Black and brown friends and neighbors and family members are living in a really different reality often, and having to be aware of such different considerations. And that's a responsibility of not just those community members, but of the entire community, to make sure that we can keep them safe from the people who have agenda to not keep them safe.
Yeah. And I think too, like when I'm doing workshops or I'm working with groups of parents, you know, I ask them to write down all of the conversations that they had with their parents about race, particularly their own race, or, you know, looking at it from a different perspective. And most of the white moms or white families that I work with, they're like scratching their heads, like, you know, we didn't, or, you know, at the most is, my parents said that we treat everybody the same. So it's mostly the colorblind.
Yep.
And then when I'm asking that with moms of color, and particularly Black moms, I have to say, okay, enough, stop writing, right? Because this is common conversations that we have with our children. And I think because a lot of white families are not having those conversations, they don't know how to have those conversations with their own children. Right. And I think the more dialogue we can have, and I'm hoping this book will bring about dialogue, right? Yeah. The more dialogue we can have about it and stop either pretending it doesn't exist, pretending it's not a big deal, or just being straight up afraid to talk about it. It's really going to stop us from moving forward as a culture. It's going to keep this divide that we have right now in our country if we're not having open dialogues around it.
Right. Can you tell us what fear-based parenting looks like, and then how does it compare to your social justice parenting model?
Yeah, I think we all want to protect our children, right? That's who we are as parents. We want the best for them. We want to make sure they're safe, and we want to protect them. And that, to the degree, is okay. But when we allow those fears to keep our children from experiences, from diving into their natural curiosities, from seeing the good in other people, celebrating differences and those kinds of things, and telling them the truth about what's going on in the world, we really are limiting them from a lot of things in their lives that could help them, right? We can't build compassion and kindness and those things when we don't allow our children to know what's going on in the real world. And I think on another level, when we live in that fear-based parenting where we are trying to protect our children, it's really a selfish way of parenting, because there are other moms like me, right? We can't just protect our kids. We have to talk about those hard things, because sometimes it's a difference between life and death, you know? So when you are choosing to protect and to shield them from a lot of the hard things that are in the world, you're really doing it from a place of single-mindedness, right? Of seeing the world in one perspective. And again, in the long run, it limits what your kids, who they can be, and the interactions that they can have. Absolutely. And I think social justice parenting really is the antidote to the fear-based parenting. Yeah. Because this is where you're saying, you know, I'm opening up my heart, I'm opening up my mind, I'm opening up the experiences and the opportunity that I can have with other people. And I want to give that to my children. I am open to listening to your perspective. I'm open to accepting and embracing your lived experiences that may be very different from mine. I'm going to love you through that. And I am going to connect in ways that make sense for me and my family with yours, right? So it's this unconditional love that really sees the humanity in all of us, right? So that's part of what we want to do with social justice parenting, is really understand what it means to love people in a radical way, and not let all of these differences and all these barriers and all these fears, right? Anxieties and fears keep us from being open-hearted and open-minded.
Yeah. I love the idea that we can celebrate differences. And I think when we talk about what you were mentioning earlier, that we have, that parents often are like, I want to shelter my child from like the horrible things in the world. And I don't want to teach my 5-year-old about the murder of George Floyd and like tell them graphic things. On the other end of that is, at the age of 5, you can just be teaching your children about celebrating differences, whether that is different, noticing, just objective noticing that like different people have different skin colors, and some families have a mom and a dad, and some families have 2 moms, and some kids' brains work this way and some work that way, or some kids have all the parents live in one house and sometimes they live in 2. It's like these really different ways of pointing out differences and noticing like, oh, isn't that interesting that people exist in these different ways? And then celebrating that, like, cool, families can be made in a lot of ways, or cool, some people have a different color skin. And it doesn't have to be this. I think that there's this misnomer that it has to be like, you have to tell your children all about 400 years of like social injustice as a bedtime story when they're 4. And that's not what it is.
Yes. It's all age appropriate, right? And as they get older and they start knowing more, you build on those things.
Right.
And I think a great way to do that is start off asking them, what do you know about that? What have you heard? What do you think about that? So that you already know where you need to start. And also, it's not like a checklist, right? I've done this once, I'm moving on to the next thing.
Right.
You have to have continuous conversations around this, because the more you talk about it, the beautiful thing about that is you get to know your kids, right? So you get to know what they're thinking about it. You also get to know where the gaps are so that you can fill those in. Like, okay, I explained that, but I could tell he didn't really understand that. So when we come back around to that, I'm going to explain that in a different way so that I can help him to unlearn what he thinks he heard, and then fill that in. So the more often you're having these dialogues, the more you get to fill in the gaps that your children are having, which they will, right? They all will, no matter what age. And you get to, in the process, provide a safe space for them to be able to have these conversations, to open up to you. So when they're having issues, or they're having these feelings, or they're feeling overwhelmed, or something major is going on in their lives, you've already created this space that they can come and talk to you about hard things. Absolutely. So, there's benefits to all of this when you start that open dialogue early.
Absolutely. Yes. And when you're celebrating differences, then your child is safe being whoever they genuinely are when they get older. And there's that to your point, like they can come to you with that. And if you are perceived to not celebrate differences, that's going to be a very different ballgame. And so that's super important. I want to talk about parenting children with neurodiversity a little bit, and mental health challenges, because I think that we've had so much awareness in many communities around opening conversations up around race within families and with our kids, and which has been amazing. And there's definitely so much room to go and so much more to grow with that. And then we also, I think, have a whole nother conversation that is like barely beginning on invisible differences. And so can you touch on parenting children with neurodiversity and mental health, and where's like the overlap and then the separation in terms of how that compares to raising Black children in your family?
There are some commonalities, right? And the commonalities are talking to your children about who they are. I think that's really important to name it. This is an example. When my son, my son who has ADHD, when he was in elementary school, the schooling didn't really support what he needed. And so I pulled him out of school and I started homeschooling him. And the first curriculum that we did was, what is ADHD? And so we really talked about what that looks like, what it feels like in your body, naming a bunch of people who had it and how successful they were. What do you eat? How do you move your body? How do you talk to other people? How do you advocate for yourself? How do you not use it as an excuse to not do your work? So I think it's really important. This is the same thing we have, the conversations that a lot of Black families are having about being Black. So I think it's really important to talk to your children about what it really means, what this label means. And it's how you can see it, both things I need to work on and ways that it's beautiful. And so it's been challenging for me as a mom, because I think because as a mom with all these degrees in education, right? Early childhood. And I just feel like, I got this thing, right? I know what it's like to be Black. I know what it's like, I know child development. I know how to create curriculum for my kids, but I did not see the mental health issues coming. I wasn't prepared for it. But it has taught me to be a different kind of mom. It's taught me to really see my kids. It's taught me to be more patient and more kind. It taught me to be a better listener to what my kids are feeling. So it's been a really gift overall for me. And listen, this book was birthed from my experiences with my oldest son, really. So I've learned so much from them. I've learned from the research that I've had to do to mother them. And I've learned to listen and be quiet and sit in the still moments where neither one of us know what to say, which has really been beautiful in times, that I wasn't trying to fix it, that I was just in it with them. And I think when we have kids with all these different identities that are often marginalized, that we have to learn to sit in it with them, that we can't always fix it. Whether it's children who are in the LGBT community and they're not finding spaces of belonging, whether it's, mental health issues, and like you say, these invisible disabilities are the ones that people really don't understand. And we have to learn to just kind of sometimes, sit back to back and hold each other up.
I love that you point out to a parent who really likes to fix things that being the fixer is not the answer, and to just sit with your child, which is really hard to do, and to just sit in it. And I know that I manage anxiety. I have a child who manages anxiety. And when he's having a hard day, I want to be like, let me give you 3 tips. Which never helps.
Yeah.
So to just like sit, and we have had many mornings sitting outside of his school building where we're just sitting, taking deep breaths together for a very long time. But like sitting in that space and just being like, this is what we're doing. And it was something that we started when he was really young that ended up being a really helpful coping skill and a coping tool for him. And just being like, you can't take it away. You can't make it better. We're just going to sit here and take deep breaths, and it might take 10 minutes. It might take 20 minutes. But like creating that space is just like, it's a very humbling experience.
But holding that space for him, it makes me always want to cry. It is going to be the thing he remembers when he grows up, how my mom held space for me when I needed her to. My daughter is on the backside of managing her depression. And there were times that I didn't know how to help her. And we spent days just kind of laying in the bed together, crying, right? Not knowing how to move forward, either of us. And now that she's on the backside of it, she is like, Mom, you were a rock, right? You held space for me. And I am so appreciative of that. And I don't know what my world would have been like without that.
Yeah.
So it seems hard when you're in it, but when you get on the backside of it, man, do they recognize, what you've done for them in that moment of silence.
Right. And it goes back to being that safe place for them to be vulnerable then again in the future, because you've shown up in that way before. So you've created that space to be like, I'm here for you, no matter what identity you're showing up with, no matter what, it's an unconditional, love and version of support. And that's forever kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Yes. And when you start those safe spaces early, when they have like really big problems, as they become preteens and teenagers where they're dealing with.
I'm not ready for that, Traci. I'm hoping that my child will never have any of those.
Oh my gosh. But you're going to be glad that you've established that early, because those issues that they come to you as teenagers are, they're life-altering decisions that they have to make. And you want to be there to either guide, support. I always ask my older kids, are you coming to me as a friend? Or are you coming to me as a mom? because those are very different responses for me, right? You know, if you're coming to me as a friend, I'm going to sit in it with you, and I'm going to listen. If you need me to be a mom, I'm gonna mama bear it, right? I'm gonna get who I need to get.
Right.
I'm gonna fix what I need to fix. So
Totally.
you let me know how I need to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can we create spaces of belonging? I think we've talked about how we can do this in our home. How do we do this in the world?
I think by showing up in your home is the first step, right? And I think part of that is this open dialogue. You know, I know a lot of times we have family meetings every Sunday after dinner. And those were the moments that our kids could say what they felt, you know. And, you know, we say, this is a safe space. You can say what you need. And they do tests. When they were preteens, they would test. They would say stuff that would maybe not be appropriate. You know,
let's see how safe it is.
Right. And you bite your tongue and you let them have that moment, right? But they know that was safe space. And over time, they recognize that was safe space. I know some families that have a safe space word. Like if I say this word to you, that means I'm coming to you with something big or something hard, and I need you to just listen. So I think whatever those practices are, some people have a safe space, physical space in their room, where they may be on the floor with pillows, with crystals, meditation area, whatever that looks like. But I think establishing a safe space, whether it's literally or it's metaphorically, kids need to know that when it's time for me to kind of get raw and say what I need to say, and know I have, there's trust built there, that I can do that. And I think part of this really establishing this open dialogue and is a first step to creating those safe spaces. And then when you're doing that at home and you begin to normalize it, right? So this is just who we are and what we do. Your children will go out and then create those same spaces for others.
Yes.
They will be the friend that everybody trusts. They will be the friend that supports people who may not fit in or maybe marginalized in some way, because it's so natural to them because you've been doing it in your own home.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. We have a couple more questions. I just want to point out to people, because I forgot to point it out at the top, that please feel free to ask questions in the chat or through the Q&A button at the bottom. And we'll get to questions in just a few minutes here, and we'll take questions. You can just drop them in. Oh, look at Rebecca. Rebecca's right on cue. I know, Rebecca. I should have known you would be the first one to pop in ahead of time, Rebecca. So we'll get to questions in just a couple minutes. Traci, in the book, you talk about the difference between raising good people, in quotes, versus pro-justice people, or good children versus pro-justice children. Can you talk a little bit about the difference?
Yeah, when I hear, like, I have clients who, mostly the moms, are saying, I want to raise anti-racist children, right? But my husband thinks that raising good people is enough. Like, why do we have to go so far? And I think really the difference between raising a good person and a child that's pro-justice is the action piece. Being good is kind of passive, right? We're teaching kids to like everybody, to do no harm, to not bully. But if you're teaching somebody to be pro-justice, you're teaching them how to stand up when those things are happening, how to be proactive, how to be an upstander. These are the anti-racists, the agitators, the allies that we'll see in the future when you're raising children to go beyond the being a good person to really raising somebody who's pro-justice, right? They see that something is not right, and they want to act to make it right.
I love that. My son is 9 and in the 3rd grade, and we started talking a little bit about being an upstander. It's very interesting. Like, he can identify like things that are like fair or just, but then you talk about like being an upstander when a friend is not being fair or just. And then like, it's all sorts of like, oh wait, but should I tell my friend they're being a bad friend? And I'm like, I don't know. Should you? What do you think? It's super interesting having those conversations and just kind of seeing the wheels turning, like, oh shoot, like, am I gonna have to tell my friend he's not being a good friend?
And then that's when I say, okay, let's role play this.
You know, I like that.
What are some words that we can use so that we feel comfortable? and our friend feels comfortable, but we feel like we were pro justice, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say this to you, and then let's list all the ways that we can respond in a way that we all feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But that we feel like we've done the right thing. So, role playing it, and then when it happens, it's almost like already in them, so that it's easier for it to come out than for them to have to try to fight with the words or find the words when they're in the moment.
Right. That totally makes sense. Okay, I want to end with something that I think gets left out of the conversation that we're having around race right now, and especially as we want to be so intentional around being allies and activists. We don't talk enough about Black joy, and white people are not, like, Black joy is just not centered in the conversation a lot, and I think it's such a critical piece. So tell us about Black joy, and why is it really important for white people to understand Black joy?
Yeah, I think especially lately in the media, right, a lot of people are talking about the talk that Black families have about, keeping our kids safe, what to do when with law enforcement, how to show up in the world. But part of that talk is talking about the wonderfulness that comes along with being Black, right? Who your ancestors are, the resiliency of who they are, and the legacy that they've left for you. Being in love with who you are, your skin color, your hair texture, all those wonderful things are also conversations that we have in our home. My company's like umbrella, the entity is called Brown Schooling, right? And so that name came about when I was homeschooling my kid, and everybody would ask, "Are you homeschooling?" And I'm like, "No, I'm brown schooling," because I want to teach my kids the wonderfulness in being in their brown skin. And so that's about teaching about their ancestors, teaching Black history, surrounding themselves with other beautiful Black children. And we don't talk about that side of the talk enough.
Right.
But those conversations are definitely happening in our homes as well.
I love it. And someone else, I was listening to an interview or something on the radio a while ago, and someone else was talking about the importance of having literature in your house that's not all about Black struggle. So it's not like white families should not just have books around like slavery and like the struggles of Black people, and especially like the historical people like we know of, like Martin Luther King's story. It's not full of a lot of Black joy. It's full of a lot of struggle and fight, which is very important to know. But also then having books that are like, if it's an age appropriate to have, for a 5 or 6 or 7 year old to have stories around like just some Black girlfriends having a slumber party, or
exactly. Yes.
Things that are just like normal kids who happen to be Black doing normal things, so that it's not, we're not creating this picture that doesn't ever create space for the joy part.
Because when you do that too, one thing that you could be doing is creating this white savior complex, right? That it's our jobs to save, it's our job to be the saviors of everything that's going bad in the Black community or whatever. So you want to some of my I don't know if anybody has really young kids, and I think my girlfriend Yolanda, who's on this call too, she introduced this book to me, the Lola books. Lola Goes to the Library. Lola, it's like Lola doing like regular things, loving books, walking to the library with her mom. So those normalizing Black life is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You have done a great job with your questions so far. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A from the audience. So if people want to go ahead and put questions in the chat or questions in the little Q&A box, and then I'll go ahead and work through those. So Rebecca asks for ideas on creating safe spaces for small spirited kids.
To me, that you should have a physical space for them, where there's pillows, where there's an area where they can let their feelings out in a safe space, but that it's where they're alone, when you have some kind of props that can help them. I know some people put things like the coloring books, so they can calm down. They put feathers for sensory development and those. But I think your spirited kids, they literally needs a soft place to land where they can just let it out without being kind of, controlled or told to calm down, but a place where they can calm down on their own and let them sit in that space. A lot of them, when they get used to staying in that space, they need it, they crave it. It really is supportive of their needs and their big feelings. So I would say for a highly spirited child, that it's important to have a physical space that's theirs. Let them help you design it or what goes in there, that they can get away. And you know what, Mom, you may need to use that space every now and then.
Like, this is a cozy little pillow and blanket over here.
Yes.
I love it. Okay. So Rebecca has Rebecca followed up a soft place to land, literally. Got it. Fluffy pillow and
yes.
And giant studies.
And then when they're not in one of their spirited moments, you can say, you know what, we're going to create this space together so that when we have these big feelings that are outside of our bodies, this is going to be a space for us to have the quiet time and work through those feelings. What do you want? What do you think needs to be in here? How can we set this up together? And then let him or her help you create that space so they know it was intentionally designed for them in those moments.
Right. Another question from Rebecca. I struggle with the racism discussion with my two kids who pass for white versus the one who does not. Granted, also big age gap. Maybe it gets easier to put into words as they get older and I practice it more.
So say it again. So she has children who are different melanin skin.
Yes. So two children are white passing, one sounds like not.
Yeah.
And then there's also a big age gap.
I have that in my
I was just going to ask. I was going to say, may I ask if you have something similar?
I have one son who's a little bit darker than the other ones are pretty similar in their look. And my oldest son is a little bit darker. And I remember when he was early middle school that it was hard for him. It was hard for him that he felt like he looked different than everybody else. And in different, it meant darker, less white. It's hard, but that's one of those moments that you just have to sit in it with them. And you have to remind them how beautiful they are and how wonderfully they're made. Also, I have one of my core values in my house is you are your brother's or your sister's keeper. And so I think it's also the responsibility of the other siblings to make sure that's not a big deal in the house. I think that to constantly remind them how beautiful and wonderfully made they are could be something, and then involving the other siblings. And I don't know if what she's saying is going on in the house or is going on outside of the house. So I guess that makes a difference as well.
Yeah, Rebecca, if you want to add anything to that, feel free. If there's any other layers that you want to add. I'm not a parent of anything but a white boy, but I'm curious if for you, Traci, you had different conversations with your older son versus your younger ones based on like how he might be perceived by society, and then did you have those like similar conversations with the younger ones as well, kind of like bringing awareness to like, this is a whole nother dynamic and layer that's objectively true that we want to make sure everyone is aware.
Our conversation, that's the same conversation I have with all my boys. Okay. I told all my boys, you're Black. I'm raising you to be Black. And with that comes some information that you need to know. It doesn't matter to me that one is lighter skinned than a darker one, because when they go out in the world, they're Black.
Yep.
And so it's a conversation that my oldest son had first, but it's the same conversation I'm having with all of my other three boys right now. So yeah, that doesn't change.
Yeah. Let's see. Rebecca added, it's more out of home. My daughter is well melanated, but my little boys are very white. She's in the proud stage, well taught by my husband. The boys don't even get that they're brown too, just lighter.
Yeah, I think it's important that your light-skinned boys, hopefully they know that they're Black as well. That you're pouring that same kind of being proud of being, I'm assuming that her children are biracial.
Yes. And I
Sure.
believe Venezuelan. Rebecca, I'm speaking for you. So please, Honduran. Okay. Thank you for the correction. I was hoping you would chime in. So
yes. Okay. So not Black, but whatever they are, making sure they really embrace. This is the one thing with my children. I want them to embrace all of who they are. But because your skin is different, you're still the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you should be loving both sides of you, being proud of both sides of you. But again, the minority or the most marginalized part of you is the part that I have to teach you how to navigate outside of the home. And so I think explaining that to her white passing children and explaining that obviously to her daughter is a conversation that they all need to have. And I think it's really important to talk about what this white passing means. Like, what does that mean? What do you think that means? What do you know about that? How do we unpack that in our house in a safe way? And then how do we navigate that outside of our homes? And so I don't know how old her kids are, but that would be a conversation that I would have in my house about what this looks like. What does that mean for us as a family, as this one unit? How do we feel about that? What are our core values around that? And then how do we protect each other when we're out in the world where it may matter to other people?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. She said, yes, with the white passing thing, they're 3 and 5. Even the Honduran family says they're white. Oh, interesting. Interesting.
A lot of times when we talk about, and also in the Black community, we talk a lot about colorism, right? That with it's discrimination within your race. And oftentimes it's our families that do the most damage with other family members around colorism. And it's the same thing I say to white families who say their extended families, there's racism in their extended families. You're going to have to decide to have that hard conversation, if it's something that extended family is saying around your children, or is making you uncomfortable, or it doesn't align with what you're trying to teach them in the house. That is a hard conversation to have with extended families. Like, this is who we are as a core family. This is what we believe. We are not supportive of us talking about our kids, one being whiter or lighter than the other. And when that kind of behaviors continues, then you have to make a decision about whether that's impactful enough to your children and what you're trying to teach them, whether you stay in that situation or you leave. And I always say too, when you are making the choice to do allyship or ally work, no matter what you're setting up for, whether it's the LGBT community, whether it's socioeconomic issues or gender, whatever, that you have to be willing, you have to know that you're going to lose some friends along the way, right?
Yeah.
Your circles are going to change. There are people who are going to fall off. They may even be family members, and you have to be prepared for that. And I always say, what is more important to you? Is the work more important to you, or offending some people that are currently in your circle? And obviously nobody can answer that but you have to know that is a high probability that would happen. And so know what you're going to feel about that before it happens, and have some language around that ready. Again, the role playing, knowing early, when this happens, this is what we're going to do. This is how I'm going to feel. This is what we're going to have to decide to do if that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot in my community is like, not everyone deserves a sort of seat at the table. Not everyone's earned a seat at the table. And sometimes family members have not earned a seat at the table.
That's true.
And I think that pre 2020, I think we made more exceptions to that. And I think since 2020, I'm sorry, not 2020, 2016, since the election in 2016, I think people have gotten more clear on like, some people are not invited. And I think we've had to practice that in so many ways. Like, we're going to protect that inner circle, whether it's our mama bear instincts or it is protecting our being, responsible activists and allies in our community. We're just getting more and clear on those boundaries. I know we have 1 minute left. Go ahead.
And you have to really be open to hearing perspective, but not being open to somebody trying to change your core values.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is a great,
I can hear what you want to say. Like, I'm willing to listen, but I'm not willing to argue with you about it. Like, I'm not willing for you to say things to me that are offensive. And I have to draw some boundaries around that. But I want us to listen to each other, because that's the way, that's the only way we can even try to shake this division that we have right now, but not at the expense of keeping my kids safe in a way, or protected in a way. Yeah.
Right. We have one last question from Sara. She says, any advice on language or scripts to teach grade school age kids to speak up in their circles or school communities if racist comments are made?
Yeah. Again, goes back to role playing. I think I have a little bit of that in the book too, but you really have to role play it, and I literally, when I do this with my kids, we get out a chart paper and we write down things that we could say. Why is that a good one? Why is that not a good one? Yeah, this one won't work. Okay, let's circle our top 5. These are the 5 that we're going to have in our back pockets, so that when these things happen, we're ready to go. And some of it could be as simple as you're not being nice, or that's not like nice language, or I'm not going to be able to play with you if you're not going to be nice to my friends, or as they get older, that is unacceptable language for me. And or I'm going to hold my own boundaries around that, because it's not the way that I talk, or it's not the way that I feel. It could be something as simple as that's not nice, or go play somewhere else. So
I love the simplicity. Like, everything that you just said is like a short, concise statement. Not teaching your kid to here's 3 paragraphs that you can.
Right. Here's the 5 paragraph essay, right?
Right. Just simple, especially for little ones. That's not nice. That's clear, memorable.
Yes.
And then even I'm going to hold a boundary, or that's unacceptable for a little bit older. I mean, those are really clear, simple.
And then I always tell my kids, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if you're being forceful, you're not going to say that's not nice. You want to teach them to say that's not nice, really showing or commanding their language around where their boundaries are. So that's great too.
Which is a good one to practice. Practice even practicing for tone of voices, I'm imagining really valuable. Yeah. Yolanda says role playing is ideal to practice the what if this happens. Yeah, I love it.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Traci, this has been so fantastic. Thank you for your time. It's 10 o'clock your time.
Yes.
On the second night of your virtual book tour, I'm imagining you're ready for bed. So thank you so much for this. And I'm going to go ahead.
For volunteering to do this, Sara. I really appreciate it.
My honor. I'm so honored. Charlie, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Well, yes, thank you, Sara and Dr. Baxley, so much. It was a pleasure just listening to your conversation. I can see why you guys clicked with each other. And thank you also to the audience, as always. We love having these virtual events where we can have people from all over. And so, yes, thank you for joining us. In the chat, I've got a couple links for you. One is the one I just sent is for the YouTube channel for Village Books, where you can view past events. This one is Libro.fm, audiobook that supports independent booksellers. And the audiobook for this book, which is actually, the link goes straight to it, is narrated by Dr. Baxley herself. And I've heard that it is very well done.
So good.
Yes, and finally, the link to the Village Books website where you can order the book if you like. And for Sara and Traci, do you guys have any last words for us before we say goodnight?
I just want to say a shout out to the people on the East Coast that are hanging with me.
Yes.
I see Erica, I see Yolanda, and I don't know if there's anybody else on the East Coast, but thank you. It's 10 o'clock here, so I really appreciate your support.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys so much once again.
Can I get a picture? Can I get a picture of the three of us for us to social media?
Go for it.
That's awesome. You got to only if you send it to us, right?
Yes. And then the attendees can just watch us be awkward here for a minute. Okay. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get a couple. Okay. Let's see. Thank you. One of those have hopefully worked out. So I'll go ahead and tag you, Traci, and I'll tag Village Books as well.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Charlie.
Thank you guys.
Everybody.
And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.